Hello, everyone, and good evening. We are going to go through a couple of housekeeping rules, and then we'll start. Tonight, because there are so many of us, we are hoping that y'all will exclusively use chat, so we don't have any rogue hot mics. We sent out some instructions in the email about being neighborly to one another and being respectful of time. And so we hope that y'all can follow those expectations. So for those of you who don't know, we are the Neighborhood Alliance of Central Oklahoma. We are a nonprofit that works to build safe, healthy, and attractive neighborhoods for all. Tonight, Maya and I, we are community organizers for the Neighborhood Alliance of Central Oklahoma. We are going to be moderating this meeting about the OKC code changes that are either have already happened or are upcoming. So Lisa and Marilyn will be covering the short-term rental ordinance that has passed and been approved first, and then they will get into the accessory dwelling portion. Marilyn and Lisa have been hard at work on this code update for a long time, and so we are going to turn it over to them.
Good evening, everyone. Give me a minute. My computer is not acting as expected. So, okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, and you can see it move. Okay. Yes, so I'm Lisa Chronister. I'm the Assistant Planning Director. If you've been to any of our previous presentations on home sharing or accessory dwellings, you've probably heard me present and or my colleague Marilyn Allen, who's also on the code. So on the meeting. So I'm going to very briefly recap the home sharing ordinance that was adopted in December of this past year, and then I'll move into accessory dwelling. So home sharing. So in 2023, the planning department was asked by the city manager's office to convene focus groups with residents, home sharing hosts and operators, Board of Adjustment members, and city staff to discuss concerns regarding home shares and how these concerns might be addressed. The results of this process were ordinance changes that were adopted by City Council on December 17th, 2024, and that are now in effect. Home sharing regulations were first adopted in 2019. These regulations established approval processes for two types of home shares where the host lives on site and home shares where the host does not live on site. Chapter 13 also required licenses for all home shares, and set grounds for the revocation of those licenses. Chapter 59 defined home share as a use that does not exceed a 30-day stay. We get questions from folks about how is it different from a normal rental because it's short-term, does not exceed a 30-day stay. It also required home shares where the host does not live on site and home shares located in historic preservation districts to obtain a special exception from the Board of Adjustment. Planning Commission recommended that the term home sharing be changed to home sharing / short-term rental to more accurately reflect the fact that the existing ordinance allowed short-term rentals for properties where the host did not live on the property. Chapter 13 also now clarifies the process for proving that the host lives on site. The new ordinance also establishes regulations of how many occupants can be in a home share at any one time. The new ordinance also establishes a revocation process if a special exception order is violated. A provision has also been added to specify that if a host has guests more than 10 calendar days of the month, they must get a special exception, even if the home is their primary residence. The new ordinance also limits the number of home shares where the host does not live on the site to 10% of the number of dwellings on a block. So if you're wondering, how do I calculate that? Planning staff can provide this information to applicants. For privacy concerns, we can't make a map, a publicly available map of all home sharing sites. So we can assist applicants with that calculation. And so that's just for the non-host occupied home shares. There is no limit to the number of home shares on a block if the host lives on the site. The new ordinance reduces the maximum term of a home sharing special exception from 10 years to 3 years and clarifies how the renewal process works. Home shares must provide 1 off-street parking space for every 4 occupants. The Board of Adjustment may also now consider restrictive covenants, deed restrictions, or lease agreements that forbid home sharing or short-term rentals. Note that those documents, the covenants, the deed restrictions, the lease agreements, they have to specify home sharing and or short-term rentals. They can't just say businesses. And the board may now also consider traffic concerns in their decisions. Traffic concerns like street width, access for emergency or delivery vehicles to cul-de-sacs, or the location and configuration of neighborhood entrances. Throughout our outreach process to develop the proposed ordinance changes, we heard repeated concerns about how the existing ordinance was enforced and how complaints were addressed. The city manager's office is working as we speak with the Office of Innovation to select a consultant that can help address these concerns. So that is the very short overview of what has changed in the new home sharing ordinance. If anyone on here has home sharing or wants to do home sharing, here's contact info for various questions. Again, all home shares need a license, and home shares that are in historic preservation districts or home shares that are not, where the host does not live on the site, those need a special exception. Cassidy, were there any questions about home sharing?
I don't see any. So I think y'all did such diligent work on that, and had, just as many feedback sessions, and for as many years as on that as you did for accessory dwellings. And I think, folks feel, oh, sorry, Scott has one. What about a 30-day plus stay?
30-day plus stay is a normal rental property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you guys continue to have questions that come up, you can always ask at the end of during our Q&A session, at the very end, about short-term rentals as well.
Absolutely. And if there aren't any more questions, Lisa and Marilyn, I have those polls that we definitely had talked about as well that I can launch on accessory dwellings, or sorry, accessory dwellings when you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay, so there's just 4 quick little poll questions. They should launch all at once. There's questions like, have you heard of accessory dwellings before? Had you heard about the proposed ordinance before tonight? Are you interested in having an accessory dwelling on your property? And do you think it's okay for others to have one on their property?
We'll give you guys just a little bit to answer that, and that just gives us some good information going forward for this conversation.
Absolutely. see, what are we at? I lived in a house zoned R4. Vincent, that is a great question, and I will get to you on that one momentarily. I might actually have you, I might reach out in an email in a moment to have Marilyn and Lisa address that one. It looks like about 75 percent of folks who have taken, you know what, we might as well, do we want to leave this open the whole time for a bit? Do we want to, what do we want to do? A couple minutes?
Yeah, we can unveil the,
Yeah.
well, actually, I want to know, like, question number one.
Yeah, so it looks like 60%, oh, sorry. 92% of folks said that they had heard of accessory dwellings before, and 80% of them said that, or that's 92%, and 82% said, or 80% said they had heard of about the accessory dwelling ordinance. And then from there, it looks like 60% of residents are not interested in having one on their property, but 64% do think it's okay for other properties in their neighborhood to have an accessory dwelling.
Okay, thank you. Then we will, let's talk more about accessory dwellings. And if anybody has been following the accessory dwellings public hearings, some of our focus groups, some of our other community meetings and outreach, this presentation is virtually identical to all the other ones. So I just mentioned that in case you're wondering if you need to pay close attention for new information. 99% of the information in this presentation is the same. So, okay, it looked like just about everybody knew what an accessory dwelling was. It's just kind of what it sounds like, a small secondary living unit allowed in a residential area, so that it could be a separate building, it could be part of a building. The key word is that it provides complete independent living facilities. That means facilities to bathe, for sanitation, places to sleep and cook. So that's what differentiates a dwelling from, say, your backyard garden shed. You know, it's a place designed and built for people to live completely. So accessory dwellings can help with housing needs in Oklahoma City. That's one reason we are proposing them. According to the Housing Affordability Implementation Plan that was presented to City Council on January 14th, home sale prices and rental rates have increased dramatically in the last 5 years. There are 77,000 cost-burdened households in Oklahoma City. Cost-burdened means that a household is spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Both owners and renters are cost-burdened. The lower your income, the greater your cost burden is. Cost burdens are a direct result of low incomes and the shortage of affordable and available rental homes. The 2025 Housing Affordability Implementation Plan also cited making regulatory improvements that would facilitate the creation of more housing. Allowing more flexible zoning regulations can help the private market to work more quickly to respond to housing demand, removing regulatory barriers to development. In short, flexible zoning speeds the response to housing demand. Multiple local and national studies and our own research include recommendations for zoning reform to address housing needs. 4 zoning code-related strategies were overwhelmingly consistent across all studies. Allow for more than one dwelling on a lot. Allow for smaller homes. For example, according to the Housing Affordability Implementation Plan, 1- and 2-person families are increasing at higher rates than the construction of 1- to 2-bedroom new home construction. We could zoning could allow greater density, especially near jobs, schools, and transit. and providing more flexible zoning could reduce and streamline permitting costs and timelines. These strategies are the basis for the entire Development Codes Update project and are addressed by the proposed accessory dwellings ordinance. However, Oklahoma City's existing code doesn't allow more than one dwelling per lot in most neighborhoods, including R1 single-family districts. Therefore, we have to update our zoning code to allow, if we want to allow accessory dwellings. The benefits of allowing accessory dwellings are many, including expanding housing supply, especially in walkable areas where infrastructure such as utilities, roads, parks, schools, transportation, and services already exist. They can help support ownership by providing homeowners with supplemental income from accessory dwelling rentals. There are the social benefits of accommodating multi-generational households and the ability to age in place. And they can accommodate, and the ordinance would accommodate the continued use and rehabilitation of existing non-conforming accessory dwellings. There is strong support for accessory dwellings in the city's comprehensive plan, Plan OKC. Plan OKC was first adopted by Planning Commission and City Council in 2015. It is a policy document used by city leaders to make decisions about the city's future growth, development, policy, and capital improvements, including land use decisions. Plan OKC recommends allowing diverse housing types and increased density in the urban core, and includes specific recommendations to revise the zoning code to allow accessory dwellings. Accessory dwellings are not a new thing. They are a historic building form that exists all over the city, especially in the urban core, where they have long provided additional housing in residential areas of the city. Allowing accessory dwellings by right in residential zoning district is one small step in the effort to increase housing availability and affordability in Oklahoma City. Many local and national studies, including the 2025 Housing Affordability Implementation Plan, the 2021 Housing Affordability Study, and the 2020 Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice, as well as local and national interest groups, are unanimous in recommending that zoning codes be modified to allow accessory dwellings. Many of our peer cities now allow accessory dwellings by right, including Nashville, Minneapolis, and San Antonio. Locally, Norman and Edmond have recently revised their zoning to allow accessory dwellings in some areas. Support for accessory dwellings is also evidenced by the number of rezoning requests over the past several years that have sought to allow accessory dwellings. Because accessory dwellings are not allowed in the code now, rezoning is currently the only way a property owner can get approval to allow one. Rezoning involves a time-consuming and expensive process that results in unpredictable outcomes that can be barriers to the construction of accessory dwellings. In the new code, new zones will be organized according to the Plan OKC LUDA designations. This will ensure that the new zones are context sensitive, matching the specific character of each LUDA. Sorry, LUDA is land use typology area. So this map on the screen, it's the LUDA map. It's a map of the vision of how the city should develop. It's not a zoning map. So what it is showing in a nutshell is that a development should happen further toward the urban core where services and infrastructure already exist. And then as opposed to on the fringe, on the edges of the city, those should be left as agricultural and rural land because it's much more efficient to develop where there's already services and infrastructure. So back to this idea of arranging the new zoning districts according to the LUDA map, to making sure that the new code is much more context sensitive, because the development standards for the rural areas are obviously going to be much different than the development standards in the urban areas. Right now, in the existing code, they're all the same, and they don't recognize how our entire city has such different development character in each of the LUDA areas. Because accessory dwellings were recommended by Plan OKC policies and supported by best practices, survey data, and other studies, planning staff considered allowing them early in our work to develop proposed new zones in the urban medium land use typology area, including allowing them by right as attached or detached units in the proposed urban medium single dwelling zone. We presented this concept to focus groups, planning commission, and to the stakeholder advisory committee at several meetings in 2022 and 2023. We started our code update work with a focus on the urban high and urban medium land use typology areas, because many UM and UH neighborhoods already have accessory dwellings, which are not supported by the existing zoning code. We wanted to incentivize development in the core to meet Plan OKC, Adapt OKC, and Preserve OKC goals, including goals of less driving and more walkability. There has been demonstrated desire over the past many years for increased infill development, as evidenced by the increased number of rezoning applications in the urban core. In 2022, as part of the code update survey, we asked the public about the types of houses people would be interested in living in or next to. 85% of respondents who lived in the city's core voiced support for allowing an additional dwelling. In a survey done as part of the 2021 Housing Affordability Study, a majority of residents in the urban core also supported accessory dwellings. So that background brings us to the ordinance as it is currently proposed. The proposed ordinance would allow accessory dwellings in the urban medium and urban high land use typology areas only if they meet certain conditions. Through our work on the zoning code update project, staff had identified metrics that would make accessory dwellings compatible with the urban medium and urban high neighborhoods. And we saw an opportunity to update the existing code to allow them in advance of the rest of the code update. Over the past several years, planning staff has held a variety of outreach activities for the new code in which accessory dwelling concepts were discussed, including focus groups with residents, developers, architects, engineers, neighborhood leaders. This outreach continued specifically regarding accessory dwellings last summer and resulted in additional ordinance provisions to address resident concerns. In our various outreach meetings, there were 5 primary concerns that staff heard repeatedly and that we worked to address: privacy, character and compatibility, parking, home sharing, and public notice. So that brings us to the specific standards. So these are conditions that would have to be met before somebody could build an accessory dwelling, before they could get a permit. They have to be zoned R1 or have a single family structure located on property zoned neighborhood conservation, R2, R3, or R4, except property that's also zoned historic landmark overlay. And if a property is already zoned by a PUD or SPUD, that's planned urban development or simplified planned unit development, If a property is already zoned PUD or SPUD, those rules would remain and this ordinance would not affect it unless accessory dwellings are already specifically permitted in the PUD or SPUD. And it does not include properties zoned HP, historic preservation. And if you're not sure what your LUDA or zoning are, you can check them online on the zoning map. You just type in your address. Other conditions, only one accessory dwelling would be allowed per lot. It could be attached or detached. It has a maximum area of 950 square feet. For reference, right now, you can build an accessory structure that's like your shop, a garage, greenhouse. You can build, the limit for accessory structures is 1,000 square feet. The height of the detached dwelling would be limited to the height of the primary dwelling, or 25 feet, whichever is less, except for garage apartments. So if you have a one-story home, your accessory dwelling would be limited to 1 story. If you have a 2-story home, you could have a 2-story accessory dwelling that's up to 25 feet tall. Setbacks would be as per the zoning district. So for R1, that's like 25 feet in the front yard. Your side and rear yard setbacks would all be the same as they are in the base zoning. Some exceptions to accommodate non-conforming structures, like if an older structure was built slightly over the current setback, they would be able to continue and rehabilitate that structure. C, all buildings and paving, including the accessory dwelling, must meet the lot coverage maximum of the zone. We want to make sure there's plenty of open space remaining on the lot to help support drainage. So for R1 and R2, the lot coverage requirement is 50% right now. So you can't have the 950 if you can't also get to 50% with your existing house plus the accessory dwelling. We heard during our outreach, a lot of people are concerned about privacy between properties. So we've prohibited rooftop decks. We wrote into the code that second floor decks and balconies have to have privacy screening between them and the property next door. And then in terms of promoting, high quality building design, manufactured homes would not be allowed. They're not allowed now in R1 and R2. They wouldn't be allowed as an accessory dwelling. Parking so you would have to have an on-site parking space for your accessory dwelling unless you're on a street that's 26 feet wide or greater, or if you have a smaller ADU, 600 square feet or less. If either of those is true, then you don't have to have parking on your property. And if you are required to have another parking space, or if you desire to have a parking space, that parking space would have to be to the side or to the back. It can't be in the front. The image on the screen is showing everything in green, in the dark green, is within a quarter mile of an existing bicycle route, transit route, or in walking distance to a trail. So you can see just at a glance so the boundary that's shown here, that's the boundary of the urban medium, LUDA, right? Roughly Northwest 63rd on the north, Southwest 59th on the south, between I-44 and I-35. You can see virtually all of the urban medium is well served by transit. You have probably seen that if you live in the urban medium, you've probably seen that with increased bus frequency, with more and more sidewalks and bike lanes going in every day. We heard concerns from neighbors about worried that accessory dwellings would only be used for home shares. The ordinance would allow an accessory dwelling to be used as a home share, but it still has to go through the process of getting a special exception. The special exception requires mailed notice, public hearing. The board can set conditions on the occupancy, number of parking spaces, things like that. So home sharing would be allowed, but again, it's not exempt from the rest of the process that's already in place. We heard from residents who are concerned that they just wanted to know what was going on. They didn't necessarily want to come downtown to the meeting to debate whether or not it should be allowed, but they just wanted to know what was planned. So we propose to do that by requiring a posting on the property with a website link or a QR code that would take you to the city's permit database, where you can look up by address. You can look up any permits that have been pulled for that property, and you can pull up a floor plan of what's proposed if it's a new building. So next steps, you may know by now that originally, well, a couple weeks ago when we planned tonight, the ADU ordinance was going to be heard again by City Council tomorrow, but it was some council members wanted to defer it a little further out. So I don't have a new date. I do know it's not going to be tomorrow. I also know there will be 2 hearings. It'll be introduced and then there'll be a final hearing, and we'll make sure to get those new dates out to Cassidy and her team to make sure everybody is aware. So I know people have wondered, people have asked us, hey, why are you just looking at accessory dwellings for the urban medium and the urban high LUDAs? You know, if they're such a good thing, shouldn't they be allowed all over the city? And we don't disagree. We do want to look at them all over the city. We just haven't gotten there yet. We started our code update work with some intense work on the core, the urban median and the urban high, because of all the development pressure for infill there. That's where we started our work. We haven't gotten to the other, looking back for the LUDA map, we haven't gotten to the whole rest of the city. We will get there. We haven't gotten far enough to tell you, you know, to what extent we think ADUs are compatible, and what size they might be and how tall they might be, or anything else about them. That's why we're not proposing them at that time. We just haven't gotten there yet, but we do intend to look at it for all other areas of the city. And then questions, contact me or Marilyn at codeupdate@okc.gov. That goes straight to Marilyn's inbox. And with that, Cassidy.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got the pre-submitted questions too.
Yeah, so we're gonna we did have some people send in questions before today to our email, and then we're also gonna try and work through as quickly as we can some of these questions in the chat. Thank you everybody for putting your questions in the chat. We really appreciate that. My name is Maya Fitch. Cassidy introduced me earlier. I'm a community organizer at the Neighborhood Alliance. Cassidy, do we want to address the pre-submitted questions?
Let's start with the pre-submitted questions, and then we can work our way through. I feel like sometimes with the pre-submitted questions we might have some answers that
Yeah, a lot of these questions connect to each other.
So one question we got was, after reading criteria and doing some research, how could a neighborhood appeal the density factor? I'm assuming that means the urban medium factor or the urban high or urban low. factor the designation the city has already assigned to them? And that's a great question because right now, right, a lot of neighborhoods in the urban medium might potentially think maybe they're urban low, but maybe there's some neighborhoods in the urban low that think they're urban high, or I mean, urban medium.
Yes, if neighborhoods think that their LUDA designation is incorrect, they they can email staff for the purpose of this, just they can go ahead and email codeupdate@okc.gov. But it's actually our comprehensive planning staff who evaluates that. But if someone believes that they've been mistyped, they can just send the question in to our staff, and we'll look at it.
Okay.
Marilyn, do you have anything to add to
Well,
that?
we have, this plan was adopted in 2015 and we had COVID and stuff. And now we're trying to, our consultants advised us, hey, you have a really nice, this land use typology area. Why don't we try zoning to that? And first thing out of the box, accessory dwellings, you've seen the challenges that we've had with that. And so we do have a process now for how you would submit a what we call a CPA, comprehensive plan amendment, and that would require 100% participation by your neighborhood and a fee of $500, and then some information like a sort of an application, not a big deal application, and then staff does a report on whether that meets the other plan OKC criteria, and then planning commission decides, just like I think we have a CPA. Either the neighborhood can bring it a CPA, or or the planning commissioner, or staff. And so in this case, as we've been reviewing, not just for accessory dwellings, but as we've been reviewing the whole approach to zoning by LUDA, which is a different approach, we realized that maybe we miscast some of the areas. So that's on Thursday, there's a meeting of Planning Commission where there is a CPA question, and Planning Commission they're in charge of the SMAP Planning Commission. So they have to decide if it meets everything that the comprehensive plan is trying to do. So there's a process. There's a process for it now.
And it's important to remember, y'all, just for clarification again, when she says CPA, she's not talking about like a tax professional. She is talking about a certified, like a comprehensive plan amendment. So like they're working to get a different designation. They're not bringing in tax accountant in. There's another question, and this one I think is interesting because I think there's multiple layers to this question. Explaining, I guess, the top 5 reasons for deleting R1 designation in the urban core, but I think it's also important to remember that we always haven't had R1, R2, R3, R4 for a long time. We just had flat R for residential, I for industrial.
Yes, so in the new code, and many of you on here may have been to some of our focus groups or public presentations. You can also go to code update, okc.gov/code update, and you can see a lot of our past presentations are on there. And what those presentations articulate about the new zoning approach is that, like we said, we're organizing the new zones around the LUDA areas. So R1, what's now R1 in the urban medium, it would be the UM-SD, and it would have some different metrics. It would have a lot of the same metrics as R1, but it would have some different ones. What we have been proposing for the last 2 or 3 years is to allow accessory dwellings in the UM-SD. So it's not just that I think the question was deleting or deleting.
Yeah, the word was deleting, but you're right. I remember long before starting at the Neighborhood Alliance, attending those 2021 workshops, and there were different configurations to even UM.
Yeah, so it's not that we're just deleting R1 just to delete R1. We're especially because the urban medium and the urban high have faced such infill development pressure. That's part of what's caused all of these spuds, is because the existing code can't provide for the type of infill that people are needing and people are wanting to build. It allows the existing code allows one dwelling a lot. There's strict lot coverage requirements. There's strict setback requirements. There's strict height requirements. And so as infill development comes along and wants to build, maybe two smaller single family homes on a lot, they can't do it because they don't have the street frontage, they don't have the lot width, they don't have any number of things. And so they have to come in and rezone to a spud. So in the new UMSD, urban medium single dwelling, there's also an urban medium multi-dwelling, and all of those we tried to get much more context specific about what can be varied and how, because we wanted to make sure it was compatible with the neighborhoods without having to go through a case by case approval process at Planning Commission that often results in very inconsistent conclusions.
Been there, done that a couple times. And it is consistent or inconsistent. I will also, in my mind, I think it's interesting, right? I don't feel like we're technically deleting it. There are parts of R1 that exist currently, like the 50% lot coverage and some of those setbacks that are just transferring over in what this is proposing as well, correct?
Yeah, we are we are happy to come back with another presentation about the new zones. I don't have all of the setback and lot coverage info in front of me, but all of that some of it's remaining the same, some of it is differing, but we have taken a closer look at all of it, and we've looked at what people are getting variances from. We've looked at what changes people are seeking in spuds and what's been getting approved over the last 5 years. And we've tried to integrate it into the new code in a way we think makes sense. So we didn't start off day one saying we're going to delete R1. That's, I think, maybe a little too simplistic of a view.
Another question that was pre-submitted is, what vision do you have for current historic neighborhoods? So your HP neighborhoods, 15 to 20 years from now, or I guess maybe it just says historic. So I guess it could be a neighborhood like a Helm Farm or Douglas Edgemere, and that it is historic because it's older, but maybe it's not HP. And then the second component of that question would be, will new HP applications be accepted in the near future?
HP zoning, so HP historic preservation zoning and HL historic landmark overlay zoning, both of those we're not currently proposing any changes. The accessory dwelling ordinance does not propose any changes. We have met with HP focus groups to talk about we think there do need to be some changes to HP and HL in that there is incomplete development standard information in both of those zones that we think could be improved, specifically in HP. So we've met with those residents a few times. We need to meet a lot more. Currently, no one is in favor of change of any sort, but we'll continue to have those conversations. So I know we, the planning department, we, the city, we're committed to protecting the HP and HL zones. Since I've been here, which is about 10 years, no other neighborhood has come forth to ask if they could be designated, but they can come forth at any time if a neighborhood wants to talk about getting rezoned as HP or HL. Yeah. We're happy to talk to them.
I put in the chat a link to the application and the guidelines and how you would,
Apply.
I don't know how to say, how you would, become historic.
Okay.
And then you would have historic design review and so forth.
And
So there is a way to do it.
correct me if I'm wrong, it is a slightly time-consuming process, correct?
Well, to become
Um,
HP or HL, it's a rezoning. It's
Mhm.
rezoning the whole neighborhood. So from that standpoint, that is time consuming. It does add a design review component to work that you're doing on the exterior of your property. But the result of that is, a high degree of quality and stylistic integrity. So it's the neighborhood's decision on if they think that is helpful to them.
Yeah. Another question I had was submitted was who is going to pay for the additional personnel needed to follow up on inspections and permits?
We've met with development services many, many times throughout the development of accessory dwellings ordinance, and they did not voice any concerns about not being able to do plan review or to do the required construction inspection.
Awesome.
I'm
Do we
sorry, I've
want
got
to
a
get
couple more.
into? Sorry, Cassidy.
No,
Continue.
sorry. I was gonna say I'm wrapping up my list. I've got a couple more. Another question was what guarantee is there will a permit what guarantee is there a permit will ever be pulled to build?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, once a building permit has been granted, I mean, it exists. There is, and hold on. Yeah, it's right there. It's right there. No, thank you. Sorry, the cleaning crew is. Um, the
I mean, people build things, right, without
Oh.
pulling permits.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if somebody comes in and gets a permit and they meet all the regs, then it's approved. And once you have built I mean, you're approved because you've met the regulations. You're not approved for any other reason because you met the regulations. And that is one reason it's very important, that, we're asking everyone we meet with to consider the proposed regulations of the accessory dwellings ordinance, because we're saying if we're good with these rules as they are presented, then there should be no reason to protest the permit because the permit has been issued in conformance with these rules. Now, yes, do people build without permits? Yes, they build all the time without permits. Is it difficult to get something removed or demolished once somebody has built something? Probably. They probably have to go through some sort of rezoning or variance process to allow what they've built, but I haven't heard that happens very often.
No, I mean, I can think of one case in my own neighborhood this last year where we knew somebody had turned a building into a quadplex and they hadn't pulled permits, but it wasn't until they listed the building as a quadplex on Zillow that we were able to prove it. And they did actually have to go through and convert it back to a single family.
Yeah,
So
that's usually what happens is people have to rezone or reconvert when they sell it, for sure.
yeah. I have a few more questions. One was the ordinance lays out specific standards that must be followed. What is going to be the process conducted by staff to ensure that compliance?
It's what the what the building permit desk does every day. Yeah, they review floor plans and applications and review them against the ordinance.
Yeah.
And this is one reason why the SPUD process, we're not lazy bureaucrats. It's just that we have a zoning code, and usually the building, but by the way, the building permit department also has to go by the building code, which is an international building code and fire code and plumbing code and all these other codes. But they're trying to, administer the zoning code. If we also we are up to 5,000 PUDs and SPUDs. So that means not only do we have one code, we have 5,000 codes, and it's very difficult for people in the building department to keep up with all that. And so there's mistakes made when we have all this, these things in SPUD, they're not well thought out. We've been working on this ordinance, what I call it a super SPUD, for a year. So we've thought of a lot of things that we would have never think of in just a simple SPUD that takes about 3 months to work through.
Yeah.
So
and
that's part of the reason why we were like, if we could just have a set of regulations that everybody is comfortable with, then wouldn't that work? Now, if it doesn't, that's fine, but that's where we were trying to get to, so that it worked for everyone.
Yeah, and if anybody has read the ordinance in detail, you might think, wow, this is like some crazy legalese because it's so detailed. But it's detailed for a reason. It's to specifically guide the plan reviewers, and we've reviewed the ordinance with them several times, and they have provided input on hey, this is administrable, what you've written, or this is not, you need to tie it down a little bit more or describe it another way. So, so that's what we have done to make sure that what gets approved is, follows the ordinance. It's a good question.
Specific standards and enforcement responsibilities would be defined under the proposed ADU ordinance. How does this compare to the enforcement and oversight of ADUs being built under a SPUD?
That's what I just tried to explain, is that
Yeah.
there's a lot of loose language in SPUDs because we have to do it so fast, and because we want people to have their say and to have a public process, but it's not that efficient, and I worry when I drive around and we were involved in writing the SPUD that it wasn't interpreted correctly. It almost needs like design review, it almost needs a higher level of, because they weren't sure exactly what we meant, and it doesn't meet the building code, what we said, what we thought we all agreed to. And so it's just hard. It's just hard.
Yeah. And I think it's also, again, as somebody who works with neighborhoods all day, but has also been through, as you two know, so many SPUDs, you don't always get this much say, and you don't always get the outcome you want. And it can be very difficult to interpret that one by one by one as you're moving forward, because they can be so wordy and difficult to understand. So I do understand that. Does the permitting process by the proposed ADU ordinance include a review of potential impacts on water runoff and existing utilities? And if so, what mitigation measures are required if negative impacts are identified?
And we had a few questions in the chat about this as well, of how it would affect public utilities,
Okay,
specifically underground.
Sure. Marilyn, is the utilities memo, is it on the Code Update website?
Yes.
Okay. We'll tell you exactly where it is, but there's a memo from the utilities department on the Code Update website that describes their assessment of how not just accessory dwellings, but other types of infill development, what their impact is on the storm sewer, on the sanitary sewer, and on water supply. And it's so minimal that they are not worried about it at all. We've heard from residents that we've been meeting with that people are worried about aging utilities, that people are worried about the capacity of utilities, the capacity for water supply is not an issue from the city's perspective. We have plenty of water supply. We can get it to all the neighborhoods. That's not an issue. If folks have a concern about water supply, like water pressure, we hear, well, my water pressure is low. That can be diagnosed. You can, if you call utilities, they can send somebody out and confirm it's not on the city's part of the line. And if they confirm it's not on the city's part of the line, then you can engage a plumber to look inboard. I live in an older neighborhood, and you know, anything could go wrong with the underground piping at any minute. But a lot of the utility infrastructure is you know, is on the private side of the property.
I think
Then
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
think sometimes when we hear the question about the utilities, sometimes there is a concern maybe about the age of the city side of utilities potentially, and how that infrastructure maybe would keep up.
Sure, the city or the utilities department has they have a 5-year you know planned improvements list and assessments. I'm trying to think well, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they have
The capital improvement plan. I
capital
think.
improvements plan, CIP. They have a 5-year CIP that they're constantly evaluating. We have met with utilities, not just on the accessory dwellings ordinance, but on all the rest of our proposed zoning code updates to confirm if we are overtaxing any of their systems. The answer is always no. But again, I know people perceive, you know, that their water pressure is low. I know they perceive that maybe they're having drainage issues more often than they think they should. They should definitely reach out. And we can, that number is in that memo, right, Marilyn, about reaching out to utilities?
Yes, I'm gonna have to post it on there tomorrow.
Okay.
But I put the FAQ, we sort of summarized it in the FAQ, but if we went the whole memo, I mean, basically the
FAQ.
city has been working to more, you know, get better technology in the water, especially in the water delivery system, so that the system can sense better, like where pressure's needed at any given time, so they can sort of, I guess, switch the levers, so to say, automatically, so that more pressure can go where it's needed. And a lot of the times they say in these older neighborhoods that it's our lines underneath our houses that are more the problem than the city lines. Now, if, let's say, they don't feel this would be necessary for just for an accessory dwelling, but let's say in the code update, you know, we're looking at, you know, more building on, say, Classen,
One
you know,
could dream.
mixed dwellings, you know, more fun stuff and more people who can live on Classen, let's say. Now, those projects, the developer's going to have to upgrade whatever they need to upgrade to put in, you know, to make whatever they need to make work.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
city's
say.
not going to do that, and so
like the Oak at Expressway and Penn. Well, they had
Yeah.
to upsize everything.
Oh, yeah.
The Edge had to upsize
all the way under
everything.
Northwest Expressway. Yeah, they had to completely upgrade all the lines around there. So
Yeah, but
So the onus of responsibility
Yeah.
on that is on the developer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I have
Mhm.
one more question, and that is following the implementation of the accessory dwelling ordinance, has there been a measurable increase in the number of accessory dwellings constructed in any cities upon the approval of an ADU ordinance? So I'm guessing that that would probably be sister city compared to us would probably be like Tulsa in this situation.
yeah, I don't have that information.
Okay.
and what was the question again?
So the question was, following the implementation of an ADU ordinance like this, has there been a measurable increase in the number of dwellings constructed in any city upon the approval of the ordinance?
You mean accessory dwelling?
Yes.
How
Okay.
many more accessory dwellings have been constructed?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a booming, thousands and thousands, like we keep saying, this is just one tool to give people another option to put their mom back there, or put a college kid, put a medical resident back there, put somebody who they just either they want to live in a nice neighborhood and they can't afford to buy a house right now. Um, there's a lot of different circumstances. And so this is just one tool in the toolbox. There's not going to be thousands and thousands of these built according to what happened in other cities. We don't know
Oh,
what.
no.
Maybe it'll be really popular here. I don't know. But
Well, that's something I know we've talked about. We talked about it, right, in our HUD consolidated plan workshop, which is on our YouTube from last month with Ben Davis, and we've talked about it at other workshops as well. And that's, that missing middle, and how missing middle does not just look like accessory dwellings. There are so many options out there. So,
Yeah.
and the younger people
well, we
want them.
Mhm. We have lots of questions in the chat. Some of them have already been answered. We already had a big conversation about the reason we're moving away from that spud process, which was something people had a lot of questions about.
RVs do not count as an accessory dwelling.
Yeah, we did answer that already. Somebody asked that.
Alice
And
asked why we removed the approach, like Tulsa. Oh, how can you not change the zoning from R1 with two living dwellings on an R1 lot? And do any planning commission members live in the affected area?
Could you repeat that question?
So one
says
question
how
was,
oh yeah.
yes,
How
go
can
ahead,
you
Maya.
not change the zoning from R1
With two
to
living
living
dwellings.
dwellings on an R1 lot?
We're
Like
allowed.
with an
Maya, you're cutting out a
go
lot.
ahead.
We're
Because
I
allowed-
am.
they can't be split from the front property. It's not like and a lot of the spuds want to do this. They want to split up the lot into 3 pieces and sell them off, each one, different owners. But so, you can put a cabana back there, an accessory building that's 1,000 square feet. You can put a lot of things, and so
Attached,
it's
detached.
yeah. I mean, you can put a dwelling inside your house, that would be locked off. But I'm forgetting what the question was. I'm sorry, but
No, the question
I'm,
was how you can put essentially two on
Yeah.
one, right?
yeah.
Like
And
in the
even our
R1.
legal department has said this is not a change from R1 zoning. It's just adding a use into the R1
Exactly.
category. It would not allow multifamily. It would not allow splitting the lots into 3. It would not allow anything that would be not R1.
Right.
So
The
you're
accessory
saying-
dwelling, just to reiterate what Marilyn was saying, the accessory dwelling can't be split off from the main structure. It has to remain accessory. And the accessory dwelling is proposed to be added as a conditional use if you're in R1, R2, R3, or R4. The conditions being this long list of height, setback, size, parking, design requirements that we have gone through.
Yeah. And then the other question, so to backtrack real quick. So you're saying that this is not taking land from R1 to R4.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah, R4 would be more than 5 dwellings, 5 or more.
Okay.
Yeah, and Cassidy, to follow up on that just for a second. So like R2, that's 2-family duplexes, but they have to be attached. R3 is 3 dwellings, but they have to be attached. R4 is 4, you get but they all have to be attached. And one thing this ordinance is doing is allowing you to have one that's detached. Only that you wouldn't be able to have more than 2 detached dwellings per lot under this.
And especially in R2, where oh, I can build a duplex, but I can't build two separate ones. And so in R2, it allows two, but they have to be attached. Yeah. So this would allow for more possibilities, attached or detached.
Do any planning commission members live in the affected area?
Yes, planning commission is by ward.
Yeah.
So Ward 6 and Ward 2 and
Ward 4.
Ward 7.
I know
And
for
a sliver
sure
of
that
Ward 4.
I know for sure that 2 and 6's planning commissioners live within the UM overlay.
I don't know where Ward 7 planning commissioner lives.
Yeah, and Ward 7 and Ward 4. There's a little bit. I don't know if where exactly that planning commissioner lives, but there's some in Ward 4.
Hold on. How is infrastructure? We answered the question about how to be removed. How is infrastructure going to be addressed, specifically increased vehicular traffic? And doesn't this benefit builders more than homeowners? We have a large footprint of acres in this city. Why is this such a proposal for more densely populated city of value?
Again, a core tenet of Plan OKC is to increase development where development already exists, because the urban core, that's where we already have all of the utility infrastructure. We have the streets, we have the transportation network, we have the services, we have the fire department, we have the hospitals, we have the employment centers. All of the things are in the urban medium. And what we have in terms of all of those things can support more development. So that's why it's more appropriate to increase the number of dwellings in the urban medium and urban high than as opposed to at the periphery of the city, where there aren't as many life safety services or utility services.
Are you trying to say that this actually helps our city budget?
That was a tenet of the development of Plan OKC, is that it's more, when I say the city, I'm saying the taxpayers, I'm saying everybody in the city. It's more cost effective to build where you've already built. It's more cost effective to infill where there's already development on the block.
Am I still cutting out, or?
No, you're good now.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing to note is that this core part of the city does already have infrastructure in place for these high densities. So like Lisa was saying, some of those outskirts wouldn't support like this type of infill as well. We had some more questions
about who was behind the change.
Oh, did I start cutting out again?
No, I was just saying we did have one about who was behind the proposed change.
Yes, that and another question that relates to that about realtors supporting this versus residents. So just a question about what types of groups spurred this code update.
What spurred the code update was Plan OKC. It was the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2015. And we get the question all the time, well, who adopted it? Well, the Planning Commission adopted it, and then it was received by City Council. And Plan OKC is the guiding policy document for all development and investment decisions, land use decisions that Planning Commission or the council makes. The CIP program is vetted against it. Bond issue stuff is vetted against it. Rezonings are vetted against it. Everything is vetted against it because it represents a lot of analysis and outreach that was done prior to its adoption in 2015. So that's where we started. We looked at our job, me and Marilyn's job, and others in our actual job is to implement Plan OKC. That's literally our job. So we look at Plan OKC and we see, okay, well, here's just 2 policies that talk about modifying codes and regulations to allow accessory dwellings. There are many other policies that talk about increased walkability, that talk about housing for all stages of life, multi-generational households, things like that. So this is just plain where we started.
You
We started
mentioned,
with this, and then the city has, since the adoption of Plan OKC, has engaged several other studies to help flesh out some of the finer points of, well, how do we make this happen? What are some other aspects to these broader policies? And that's where these studies from 2020 through 2025 came into place. So that's where we started. Then the realtors contacted us, a couple years ago and said, hey, our local organization platform and our national platform is to provide for accessory dwellings. What can we do? What can we do to help? What are you guys doing? The realtors asked us, what are you doing about this? And we said, well, we're working on it too. So they have been able to share some best practices with us. And yeah, I mean, I hate that people think it's something other than what it is. It starts with Plan OKC, and that's it. It's not very glamorous, but that's what it is.
And then
And I
we put out this ordinance last April for public comment because, we did the best we could in coming up with an ordinance, and we've had between April and November, when the Planning Commission sent the ordinance to council, we had 142 emails, and 40, and they were from a lot of different parts of the city, but mostly obviously urban medium area. 42% were against or had suggestions on how to change it, which was great. And then 58% were for. About 10% of those were realtors who were, are trying to help find solutions for housing in cities across the nation. This is not just Oklahoma City. There's a housing crisis across the nation that we're trying to figure out how to address. Not homelessness, but that's a different, we can't address that with ADUs, but just in general across the country, cities all over are trying to figure out how to address the housing shortage that we have. And so it was 58% for in the comments that we got. But we also got, even the people who were for said, change this line of the ordinance, or why would you allow, what about home sharing? We shouldn't allow these to be home shared. And so we kept trying to change the ordinance to address people's comments, which was terrific that we had a lot of people commenting. It was great.
So one thing I did notice, and this ties to what we were just asking, sorry, Maya, is there's, when we talk about this data, there are folks, we see them on, we hear from them at the office, and we're hearing from them tonight in the chat. They want to know how this information was reviewed, how this got to residents for survey, who reviewed the survey data, who commissioned the survey data, all of that. They want to know who paid for the data. There are some questions about the data and how this was decided.
Okay, the surveys are just one aspect of everything we looked at. For the surveys, we want, because it had been a couple of years since Plan OKC was adopted, we wanted to refresh some of our data on it. So our planning team developed a survey that asked a whole bunch of things, specifically about housing types and styles and design in any given neighborhood. And we circulated that. We got hundreds of responses, at least, maybe more.
Well, we went to events, we circulated on, social media.
Or that was like
The city put out, press
2022.
releases. We also went to we went to not all the 9 libraries and had meetings. And a lot of people came in all the different wards and talked to us about different things they would like to see or not see. And they filled out surveys. The people who were there filled out surveys. And it wasn't just about accessory dwellings, it's about a wide range of things. So,
Yeah, and I know during 2020, because I know it was 2020 and 2021 because it was on Zoom, we did a lot of focus groups related to community appearance, where we gleaned some more info. So, I mean, we try to communicate it the best we can. We circulate a lot of information through Neighborhood Alliance. We have a OKC.gov. We have a mail list, gov.delivery email list. I don't, if you feel you haven't been receiving communications or invitations to participate, definitely email your contact info to okc.gov/code update so we can include it.
we were at like Paseo first night, the Capitol Hill fiesta they had in September 2 years ago. Well, they have it annually, but that one they had 2 years ago. We were at all the libraries. We were at
something
other downtown events.
we were something at the Washington Park in over on the northeast side. We did that at least twice.
Mm-hmm. So we tried to just kind of go everywhere, but it's not it wasn't like a survey, a commissioned survey by anyone that's scientific or anything.
Well, but the one we did for the code update, the 2022 one, that was a formal survey in that we had formal questions that we asked to all over the city it started with a curated list, but then we expanded. There was no limit to it. I mean, it was live on our website for many months.
Now, the one that the housing study did in it was right before COVID. It was like January 2020, and they actually did one of those phone call ones. So more scientific. So the stuff that's from there was actually a commissioned, paid for polling, expert person who did that one.
All right. There were a couple very just straightforward questions, like how far from the existing property lines can the new structure be built? And they're inside the setback line, they can be as close or far as you would like to build. Is that correct?
The side yard setback, the typical side yard setback for R1 or R2, I think is 5 feet. And then the rear yard setback is 10 feet. And the front yard setback is typically 25 feet.
Okay.
That's that's existing. That's where you could build.
That's not being changed at all. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Also, what about a tiny home pre-manufactured? And we had already discussed that prefab homes are not part of R1. But somebody did say per definition has to have an underground foundation to be considered a permanent structure.
Correct. Yep.
If it's modular is getting to be kind of manufacturers getting to be a little bit of confusing term now because we're gonna have robots building houses and factories. But if they are built to what I was talking about, the International Residential Code, the IRC, then they can be brought on site in pieces and put together. That's fine. But the ones that are built to HUD standards, to federal standards, they don't meet the building codes that we follow here in Oklahoma City that the council has adopted. So there are places where those can go, but they would not be allowed as an accessory dwelling.
Marilyn, could I buy a boxable casita and put it in my backyard?
Yes.
that count? I can't.
The casitas meet IRC.
As long as they meet IRC and all the other metrics that are in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to tiny homes, like not like, Tiny House Nation or whatever the show was, where they build them on a
Yeah.
trailer. Yeah, those, I'm pretty sure those don't meet the IRC.
Well, they
But if
some are being designed now to meet that. So,
but now I'm saying the ones on that show, if people are familiar with that show.
oh, I haven't watched this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you could build one that meets IRC, that gets its inspections, you could build it off-site, you could bring it in and set it on a foundation, and
Yeah.
it would be approved. But back to this concept of tiny homes, we get this question a lot. There's no minimum size of a home in the zoning code. There's a minimum functional size to meet building code requirements. Like you have to have a certain amount of clearance of plumbing fixtures, and your bedroom has to be a certain size, all these things, but there's not a minimum size. So it could be however small you could functionally make it.
And an
Okay.
RV is not allowed to be lived in now and would not be allowed to be lived in R1
Okay.
as an accessory dwelling.
One thing I saw pop up, and I think we missed it. Somebody wants to know if you can tell them if residents in support of this are actually property or homeowners.
The ones who wrote in the 142, most of them were homeowners.
Okay.
That's only 142. We have a lot of homes in Oklahoma City, but just of that sample, most were homeowners who wrote in.
And for the surveys, for the online surveys we did in the past, for most surveys, we asked for people for their zip code. And we are trying to elicit opinion of not just property owners, but also people who rent, who may have lived in the neighborhood for some time. We think it's important to get their opinion.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I've got
It's
a neighbor
important
who's rented for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to note that the majority of our housing is rentals. And so
We're
that
like
means the
50-50,
majority of our
right?
citizenship are renters. And so that is an important thing to note, that their input is valid and important in this conversation as well. We did have a question about how can we be assured permits are pulled and structures meet codes. We've kind of already discussed that a little bit. Do you want to address that again?
We've worked with, the planning department does not review or issue building permits. We don't do construction inspections. All of that's done by Development Services Department. But we have worked very closely with the permit desk supervisor to always review the code drafts, to make sure that they can be administered, to make sure that they can be inspected against. So we've done our due diligence on that aspect.
I've seen a
Okay.
number of questions come in talking about, and I don't think we've really covered this one, but we kind of have, right? But the conversation about with it being so large in lane capacity, like I know we talked about like services, right, and infill, but I guess the question more is like why we need this specific type of dwelling.
Yeah,
Right,
there's been
versus
several
maybe a
questions
duplex.
regarding how many apartment complexes we have.
Mhm.
So why would this be a piece of infill that we would use as opposed to apartment complexes? I've seen that question.
Well, that is a good question. I mean, I think it'd be great to put a whole bunch of apartment complexes throughout the urban medium. But one, people get really upset when you say they're proposing an apartment next to their property. So doing a lot of smaller infill type construction has historically been more popular because it's like many neighborhoods already have freestanding garages. So convert the freestanding garage into an accessory dwelling, it's hardly visually changing the character. The new code will have more provisions for kind of cottage court neighborhoods, where there's a cluster of smaller homes on maybe 2 or 3 lots. things that are smaller in size, but still provide more housing, all, and is visually more in character with the neighborhood. All that's achievable.
And,
Um,
you're limiting people they either have to have an R1 house or live in an apartment complex. That's, the equity there is hard. Why can't if my mom needs a place to live, I have to put her in an apartment complex versus anything else. And so the missing middle is what our grandparents built, or great grandparents, or depending, because it works. It doesn't take up a lot of room. Those apartment complexes have a lot of big parking lots, and they're separated off from the rest of the world.
Yeah, they're not.
It's just not a.
It's hard to integrate them literally integrate them into the neighborhood where.
not just that, but it's so hard, right, to like have a feel of community in those. It can be very overwhelming when there's 400 miniature boxes and you see each other maybe getting into your car.
And
Yeah.
the other thing is those are not affordable. I mean, those are
Yeah.
becoming less and less affordable, because I feel like it's like the spreadsheetization of things, of the corporate America, where they know on any given day what any apartment complex is charging. So they have this counter that moves. When I moved here, I moved into an apartment, and the lady was driving me crazy because I knew she was going to drop the rents in October, and it was like September 15th, and they wouldn't, because on that day the spreadsheet for the Planet said, no, it's this price, no matter where it was. It didn't matter where it was, or the amenities in the apartment, or anything, parking spaces. It was just price per square foot kind of thing. And so these accessory dwellings, the research that we have found, and that the realtors have found in their research on that topic, is these are generally, at least maybe like, I'll just like $400 a month cheaper than you could get in an apartment complex. So for my daughter's friend who came here to be a resident at OU, they're not making very much money. She couldn't afford more than $900 a month, and she had a hard time finding anything that was safe for her to come in and out, at all the hours that the residents keep. And so an accessory dwelling would have been a great option for her.
We talked a little bit, you mentioned infill. There are large swaths of the urban medium area that some have what we consider blight, and some just have numerous empty lots throughout the neighborhood. How much land do you think honestly is undeveloped right now in the urban core?
We have
I mean, that qualifies.
Yeah, we have run that. We have run that number, and I don't immediately remember what it was, but we can circulate it back out.
Okay.
But accessory dwellings, I mean, they're not for vacant land. They're because they're accessory to a primary dwelling.
Yeah. Well, and I'm
So-
thinking, right, as we see some of those lots hopefully come back online, right? This is a way to ensure you have that extra, right, space just in case you need it.
So we are coming to kind of the end of our time, and we have a lot of questions left. So if we could run through some of them kind of quickly, that would be good. I want to make sure everybody's voice is heard as best as we can.
And I would Maya, even if we're not able to get to everyone, I can stay on like just a tiny bit. Even if we're not able to get to everyone's questions, I would love it if you could send all the questions to Marilyn and I, so
I think that's perfect as well.
We probably can't answer everybody individually.
Yeah, no, I
It
completely
will help us
understand
to
that.
see them.
And you guys all have their contact information now, so if you would like to ask those questions that don't get answered to them, that's an option as well. So we've had one question about they're worried that this will decrease property values because it will increase renters in their neighborhood. Is that a concern that the city has looked at?
Yeah, we've heard this concern from residents, and conventional real estate wisdom is the more square footage you have, the more your property is worth. And the realtors have shared with us that they have clients who want accessory dwellings, want/need. They want it for a family member, or they need it for supplemental income to afford to afford what they want to buy. So no, we have no data that says it decreases property values.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then I also saw some questions regarding their worry about out-of-state investors being the primary builders of these ADUs, but like buying up property and building it as opposed to owner-occupied residences. Is there any data to suggest that may happen?
We have no data that suggests that may happen. We've heard that concern from a lot of people. I mean, yeah, I have no data. I mean, it could happen, right? I mean, an out-of-state investor could buy my house and then build an ADU in back of my house and rent out both of those houses. That could happen, right? I mean, that could happen. But A, I don't want to move, and B, it's fine. I know people are worried about having too many rental properties in their neighborhood. The accessory
That's a
dwelling
big concern.
ordinance is designed for property owners to build or renovate an accessory dwelling on their property. Is it possible that some investors would operate two rental properties? Yes. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No. Maya just had some statistics about what percentage of
It's like 50-50.
people need to rent. I mean, I needed to rent, right? We all needed to rent at some point in our early adult lives. At least I did. So, people need housing. People need housing to buy. Some people need housing to rent. People need quality housing, near services, near their friends and family.
Well, thank you for that answer. Another question is just or comment is people are concerned that this infringes on their property rights as property owners. And they feel that the current SPUD process, which we've already talked about, but give a little bit, but that gives them more say and more rights as residents. And that's just something that I continue seeing in the chat. So I wanted to go ahead and make sure that comment was heard. I don't know if you guys have anything to say on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that want to know why, I guess because of property rights, right? I've seen a lot of comments talking about, well, why can't we still have notice?
Yes, and they're concerned about that notice to the residents around them when these are being built.
Yeah, I'll address that, and then maybe this is the last question. If people want notice before something is approved, then that means we have to have a public hearing, right? So we have to have a public hearing, and some public body has to render that decision, right? I mean, that's how it works. That's how it's working at Planning Commission right now. Somebody applies, 6 weeks later, they get on a agenda, notice has been mailed to the neighbors so they can come and voice their concerns. We're asking people in this to voice your concerns now, because so that you don't have to take off work on Thursday afternoons to go to Planning Commission. We're saying, what do you want to see for accessory dwellings now? We can write it in. That way you don't have to go to Planning Commission and try to talk them into it and hope they see your point of view. That's where, we're trying to do it up front instead of forcing everybody into a hearing. And then if somebody has met all of the criteria that everybody has voiced, hey, this is important to me. It's important to me that accessory dwellings not be any taller than the primary dwelling. It's important to me that accessory dwellings have their own parking space. It's important to me that they meet the lot coverage, all the things. If those things have been addressed in the ordinance and it's a requirement, then there should be no basis for voicing opposition, because it's all been embedded in the ordinance. At least that's what staff's trying to do. We're not trying to supplant people's voices. We're just trying to say, give us your voice now. Like I said, Marilyn has combed through 5 years worth of spuds, and she knows exactly what people are coming to voice concerns about. We know, maybe as importantly, we know what planning commission is approving, and it is not necessarily what the neighbors were bringing to their attention. So it's very unpredictable, and we're trying to say, hey, let's get some just concrete, predictable criteria that are easy to interpret, easy to enforce, easy to understand. Let's embed them for everybody, so there's a great deal of predictability, and we don't have to take our chances at planning commission. I hope that makes sense. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to remove people from the process. We're trying to make sure residents' voices are heard, as before the process even begins.
Okay, well, thank you. We are out of time. I would encourage anybody that feels that they did not get their questions answered to reach out. Marilyn and Lisa, we will give you all of these questions in the chat so you can just note them and have that record. And we really appreciate everybody coming and voicing their opinions.
And this is going to city council, so you should really reach out to your city council members and let them know, yeah, I don't like the height, I don't like this or that or the other, and we want a spud light. Any of those are options that can be written into the ordinance, so it's up to the council.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, except the spud light is not an option, because spud is the light of the PUD process, so there's not a lighter version, but yeah.
I also
Well,
think it's important to realize, and I've heard Marilyn say this countless times, you will never have more input on what is essentially a spud than right now. Right? Like this is that time. If your neighborhood has ever gone through a spud, it is a really quick, like 3-month process if you're lucky to get a continuance. We have never been able to provide this much as a city, this much time and feedback to build out code like we have now.
And just like Marilyn said, this is not the last of this conversation. It will be going to the planning commission eventually, or to city council eventually. So you can reach out to those counselors. And when that date comes up, it's a public meeting, so you are more than welcome to come to that council meeting as well. So, and I believe that we will have that date in the near future.
Yeah, and I'll make sure and circulate it out to Neighborhood Alliance so they can send it to everyone.
Yeah, we will definitely send that information out.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you guys coming. Okay. Thank you.